Yes, the archetypal nature of human consciousness is one that is our form of experiencing language, but really our experience as a human being put into language. But language spoken is just one form. But there's the language of images. There's the language of dreams. There's the language of vivid visions while we are awake. And so this language is archetypal in its own nature, because what is being conveyed, as we know, a picture can say 1,000 words. And so there's meaning and intrinsic value contained in the images. In this case, standing in front of a row of houses and moving into one house, we can just think, oh, that's a strange house. But really, what does a house represent? It's a store place. It's an environment in which it's an ecosystem in of itself, in which a whole range of items, and in this case, relating to humans, memories are accessible. And so why it is archetypal is because there's always story contained within the language that may come through images, or that may come through dreams, or that may come through driving somewhere in the car and kind of day drifting a little bit, and all of a sudden a thought emerges that kind of sparks that interest. But there are so many more forms of language that humans are so disconnected from. And so there's the intrinsic communion that happens through nature, through what we may call our spirit guides, but really it's the interconnected web of life that we are tied to, so to speak. We are enmeshed with. And when we start training ourselves to have more of a focus and awareness, we may find that the random flying by dragonfly, or the seemingly unintentionally drifting by butterfly, or the salamander, or the eagle flying over, or the crow that sits and cows at us and then leaves. In Australia, they have this beautiful bird called the kookaburra. And it is the most hilarious bird in the world, because it laughs out loud. So it starts like, and so we may very easily, because we're so programmed to operate in that headspace, we may just interpret that through the mind and be like, oh yeah, that's a bird. And when we open up our awareness that communion and energetic exchange and information exchange in nature is happening all the time, how it is accessible for us humans of the Western mind is when we practice ceremony, or we participate in ceremony with those that know how to coordinate and hold ceremony. And again, commune with the spirit realm, commune with the natural world, to give us affirmation, to give us insights, to give us guidance, to help us kind of drop deeper into the interconnectedness of life. When we simply look at the agroforest, and so we bring it back to the simplicity, we step out of the spiritual, metaphysical engagement with the realm of spirit, and we just engage with the realm of syntropy, we can see that life everywhere, in your garden, in the forest, on the sidewalk, there's communion taking place all the time. There's nutrient exchange, there are requests, there are indicators for support, there are always exchanges happening. And really what all of that is just language being exchanged. There's information, there's energy being communicated. And the best way that I see that is that is communion. Another form of language that is available to us And when we move out of the agroforest and we recognize, yeah, there is communication going on. The wind communicates. It is a spirit of its own accord. And it's really all about our own willingness to be open, to receive, to be open, to be in communion. And if we're not willing, we're not going to hear anything. If we're not willing, we're not going to receive anything. If we're not willing, we're not going to be able to interpret it other than judging it. Because what our willingness does, it dissolves our judgment and it opens us up for curiosity. And what happens in our biological metric is that then more of our innate capacity for communion all of a sudden gets switched on because we're willing. And so what happens when we're willing to come into awareness of how life may be communicating to us and with us, and indirectly actually also from us. So it opens up ourselves to actually pay attention at those little moments when that butterfly flutters by, or when that salamander just sits there on the rock and stares at you. And it's not necessarily, quote unquote, easy to interpret everything as some sort of message. But what I've found is that because we have predominantly only used spoken language between humans as our way of relating, there is a retraining that becomes available. There's a remembering that comes available. I'm not saying that we going to be looking then for the coincidences and everything has a spiritual meaning and all of a sudden like, oh, we're going to be, because this is what the spiritual ego does a lot. It goes into interpretation. It goes in like, oh, and then that packet fell out of and it was just perfect. It was supposed to happen like that because that made me stop and think about. And you know, the reality of that is that we can make our own spiritual fruity land turn into a self-fulfilling prophecies all the time. But the communion that the language of images and the language that comes through nature or our dreams or through the wind or through vividly all of a sudden remembering a memory that we haven't had access to for all of our lives, those forms of communion, they can become more clear and more definitive in what the message is when we are willing to raise our ability to come to that level of where it actually operates from. And this is, of course, where ceremony in and of itself is really just an opportunity for us as humans to drop out of the mind into our body, be in our heart space, so that we are actually more bioavailable for the realm of spirit, for the realm of the supernatural, which is available to us all the time. But if we are only operating here and we're busy, well, then we're going to end up seeing some signs or seeing some communion forms as like big spiritual guide stones on our journey. And meanwhile, if we only took the time to really drop in and really sit more with it, there is something in the dream itself that carries the message. And it's not about interpreting intellectually. It's just really, again, being willing to question the function, to come into awareness. And when that will is there, then we can unlock the layers of communion that our cells are bringing up with more ease and grace. We don't have to kind of jump into, oh, that's what that means. No, that comes about naturally when we're open and curious. 20 odd years later, that through my own questing, I actually came across that there is such a thing as the language of images. And of course, all the pieces of the puzzle came together. And then I really actually started, quote unquote, excavating that and really going deeper into that. Like, how can I hone in on this quality, on this gift that I have kind of let become dull and dimmed? How can I polish all of that up again? And so I studied various traditions in the language of images. One of them is the blue vase or the blue vase mystery school. Entered into a whole range of visualization practices through different mystery schools so that I could utilize their teachings to basically unlock all of this innate activity. And so now when I experience dreams myself, or I hear people talk what it is that they're talking about, they're painting pictures, and I can feel into the images as to what it is that they're really saying without them even knowing it, or what really wants to be discovered by them sounding out what it is that they're sounding out. And so I have a tendency to never brush over dream, because there's going to be something there.